I was lying in my private room at the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal for days post-surgery when the night nurse leaned close to my ear and whispered -6, words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. Don't take the pills your son brings. I blinked up at her, my mind still thick with the residual fog of the anesthesia and the steady drip of the pain meds. Sorry, what did you say? Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you were listening in the comments. But she was already gliding away, her face a carefully constructed mask of neutrality as she efficiently adjusted the flow rate on my four-pump. My son, Ethan, walked in at that exact moment, carrying a small, glossy, branded paper bag from the hospital's pharmacy downstairs. The nurse glanced at the bag, then back at me, and in that fleeting moment, I saw it, a sharp, unmistakable flash of warning and a profound professional fear. Before I could even begin to process the look, she had slipped out of the room. "Hey, Dad." Ethan set the bag down on the pristine white expanse of my bedside table. "How are you feeling?" Like someone ran a steamroller over my left hip. I replied, trying to force a normal, conversational tone, even though the drum of my heart had instantly ratcheted up to an alarming pace. "What's in the bag?" "Oh, just some essential supplements. The surgeon mentioned you might need extra magnesium and omega-3 to help with bone fusion during recovery. I picked some up for you." He offered a practiced, easy smile. That same smile I'd seen when he was -years old and aced his regional science fair, when he walked across the stage to receive his degree from the McGill School of Business with highest honors, when he and Charlotte married -7 years ago in a beautiful, sprawling ceremony on the St. Lawrence River. But now, all that beautiful history was drowned out by the harsh, cold echo of the nurse's whisper. I pressed the call button on the remote. A different nurse arrived, much younger, wearing brightly patterned scrubs and a tired, professional smile. "Yes, Mr. Vance? Is everything all right?" "The nurse who was just here?" I asked, keeping my voice mild and conversational. "The one with the dark hair, maybe around -50 What's her name?" "Oh, that's Patricia. Patricia Dubois," the young nurse replied instantly. "She's our senior clinical coordinator on this floor. She's been here about -2 decades. Why do you ask? Is she still on shift until -11 "Yes, she is. Is everything okay?" "Perfectly fine," I lied smoothly. "I just wanted to thank her properly. She was very attentive when adjusting my pump earlier." After the young nurse departed, I waited and I thought. Patricia Dubois, -2 decades of experience, a senior clinical coordinator, not some jittery intern who would fabricate baseless accusations or jeopardize her entire livelihood on simple paranoia. Which meant she knew something concrete. I must have finally drifted off, because when I opened my eyes again, the sky outside my large window was an inky, starless black. The hospital had acquired that peculiar, deep quiet of the late evening hours, only the distant, rhythmic beeping of monitors and the soft, almost ghostly squeak of rubber soles on the polished linoleum floor. Patricia appeared in my doorway like a shadow, given form. "Mr. Vance," she whispered, glancing quickly down the deserted corridor, then stepped inside and pulled the door almost completely shut. "I need to speak with you, and I don't have much time." "What is happening?" I struggled to sit up straighter, my healing hip protesting the sudden movement. She moved swiftly to my bedside, her voice barely audible over the rush of the four-pump. "Earlier today, I was in the small staff break room. It shares a thin ventilation shaft with the family consultation room next door. I couldn't help but overhear your son and daughter-in-law talking." My mouth instantly went dry. The sudden lack of saliva was terrifying. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop," she continued quickly, her eyes fixed on the door crack. "But I distinctly heard your daughter-in-law, Charlotte, say something about increasing the delivery rate, and your son responding that they had to be careful because the surgeon was already asking detailed questions about the post-op vitals." The room didn't tilt, but the entire reality of my situation did. Then she added the phrase that sunk the whole terrible truth. "Once he's out of here, once he's home, it'll be simple. No professional supervision. We can accelerate the timeline." "Accelerate what timeline?" My voice came out as a weak, strangled croak. Patricia's eyes were a perfect mix of professional, worried concern, and intense personal fright. Mr. Vance, I've been a nurse for 20 years. I've seen families do awful things for inheritance, for insurance payouts, for the sudden freedom from caregiving burdens. I don't know what they're planning, but those words, those exact words, I've heard variations of them before. Usually right before something disastrous happens. You think they're trying to kill me? I said it flatly, devoid of any visible emotion, because if I allowed any feeling, any rage or grief to surface, I knew I would shatter right there. I think you need to be extremely, extremely cautious. She looked down at the medical information clipped to the end of my bed. I checked your chart meticulously. You're on -3 major medications, a high-potency blood thinner post-surgery, a long-term blood pressure stabilizer, and -1 powerful pain regimen. Any one of those if the dosage is wrong or if they're mixed with the wrong supplements or drugs. She trailed off, unable or unwilling to complete the devastating sentence. I thought about the bottle of magnesium/calcium forte sitting -2 feet away. Can you test those supplements Ethan brought? Not without proper authorization, Mr. Vance. And that would instantly alert them that someone is suspicious and that I talked to you. She paused, her voice dropping lower. But I can tell you this, magnesium and calcium supplements, especially in high doses like forte formulations, should never be started without first checking your existing serum levels, especially when you're taking specific blood pressure medications. Too much magnesium can cause profound hypotension, respiratory distress, heart block, and in high doses combined with your other complex medications, it could absolutely look like a sudden, fatal post-surgical complication. It could kill me. I finished her sentence, the truth settling on me like a burial shroud. She nodded once, slowly, or at least cause serious, untraceable complications that would look like natural post-surgical issues. Natural causes. We stared at each other in the dim light cast by the bedside monitor. Why are you doing this? I asked, a surge of gratitude mixing with the terror. You could lose your job, Patricia. Because I took an oath, she said, her voice steady now. First, do no harm. That includes warning patients when I sincerely believe they are in acute danger, even if I can't provide conclusive, legal proof yet. What should I do? Don't take anything they give you that isn't administered and documented by the hospital or your primary surgeon. When you're discharged, absolutely insist on being transferred to a supervised rehabilitation facility instead of their home. Buy yourself time. Time to figure out what is truly happening. After Patricia left, I lay awake until the gray light of dawn filled my room, my mind churning through 45 years of memories. Ethan at age -8 distraught because he had accidentally snapped the model airplane I'd spent weeks building. Ethan at -14 telling me he wanted to pursue architecture, just like his father. Ethan at -27 holding Marie's hand in the hospice room as the illness consumed her, his face streaked with tears of genuine, agonizing grief. How does that person transform into someone who plots his father's demise? Unless Charlotte was the primary engine. I'd never quite connected with her, to be honest. She was aggressively polished, calculating, worked in high-stakes private equity, always talking about leverage, acquisitions, and maximizing returns. She had been the one pushing for me to update my last year just to make sure everything's perfectly indexed, Arthur, she'd said with that sharp, charming smile. And I had done it. I had bequeathed everything to Ethan. The sprawling, waterfront penthouse in Old Montreal, appraised at $3.5 million. The diversified investment portfolio Marie and I had meticulously built, now valued at nearly $5 million. The substantial life insurance payout. All of it. I had made Ethan the sole executor. Worse, I had given him power of attorney for all financial and healthcare decisions should I become legally incapacitated. I had essentially handed them the comprehensive blueprint for my own murder and subsequent financial control. The next morning, my surgeon, Dr. Chun, made his rounds. "Mr. Vance, you're looking robust. I think we can discharge you this afternoon." "Actually, doctor," I began, keeping my voice utterly casual and measured. "I've been giving this a lot of thought. Given my age and the fact that I'm currently living alone, I think I'd feel significantly more secure spending 10 days or so at a dedicated rehabilitation facility, just to make sure I'm completely steady on my feet before going home." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Your son indicated you'd be staying with him and his wife, Mr. Vance." "Plans changed," I said with finality. "I'd prefer professional, structured rehabilitation for the initial recovery phase." Ethan, who had just walked in carrying a thermos of expensive coffee, instantly stiffened. "Dad, we discussed this at length. We have a guest suite ready. You're coming home with us." "I have changed my mind, Ethan." I met his eyes steadily. "I have decided that I require a rehabilitation facility." "That is completely ridiculous," he insisted, his voice hardening. "We've taken 2 weeks off work. Charlotte has stocked the kitchen with special dietary items. We are ready." "I'm not asking, Ethan. I am stating what I have decided for my own immediate medical care." Something flashed across his face. It wasn't just disappointment. It was deep, profound frustration, edged with a terrifying spark of anger. Dr. Chun cleared his throat politely. "Well, it is absolutely the patient's right to choose their recovery environment. I'll have the discharge planner arrange immediate placement. We should have you transferred to the Lakeshore Recovery Center by this evening." After the doctor left, Ethan stood at the foot of my bed, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "What is this really about, Dad?" "Just caution," I replied, keeping my tone mild and elderly. "At my age, you can't afford to take unnecessary risks with recovery." He studied me for what felt like an eternity, searching my eyes for any sign of doubt or deception. "Charlotte is going to be incredibly disappointed. She will understand," I stated firmly. But the tight clench of his jaw, the subtle tremor in his hand that held the coffee thermos, told me everything I needed to know. Charlotte wouldn't just be disappointed. She would be furious. Because whatever complex plot they had engineered, it required me to be in their house, under their complete, unsupervised control. My refusal had just disrupted their entire, murderous timeline. The rehabilitation facility, the Lakeshore Recovery Center, was everything I needed: bright, professionally run, and, most critically, staffed 24 hours a day. My medication schedule was managed by rotating nurses who documented the administration of every single pill. My vital signs were checked meticulously 3 times daily. I had physical therapy twice a day, and, most importantly, I had uninterrupted time to think. Ethan and Charlotte visited the first day, putting on a spectacular display of concern and forced goodwill. Charlotte brought a towering vase of expensive orchids. "We just want you to be totally comfortable, Arthur," she said, using my first name as she always did, never dad or father-in-law. "Are you absolutely certain you wouldn't be happier with family?" "Quite certain," I said, my voice steady. "But thank you for the genuine concern." They did not visit the second day, or the third. On the 4th day, I received a carefully timed call from my longtime lawyer, Dominique Pelletier. "Arthur, I just had a rather unusual conversation with Ethan. He was asking quite specific questions about your will, particularly regarding the provisions if you were to become suddenly mentally incapacitated." My blood turned to pure, glacial ice. "What exactly did you tell him, Dominique?" "The truth," she stated crisply, "that you have a power of attorney arrangement for health care, but any substantial changes to the will require you to be of sound mind, witnessed by -2 independent parties, and formally notarized. And if someone were to suddenly claim you weren't of sound mind." Dominique paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Then there would need to be compelling, documented medical evidence, possibly including a formal psychiatric evaluation. It is not at all easy to declare an established, competent client mentally incompetent. Arthur, why are you asking these details? Just curious, Dominique. I replied, trying to keep my voice light and distant. Plenty of time to think here in rehab. Is everything on your end all right? Perfectly fine. But was far from fine. The dash three pieces of the puzzle were now clicking together with horrifying precision, like a complex mechanism engaging its final gear. One dash, get me into their house where they control the medication and environment. Dash two dash, use the toxic pills to cause neurological symptoms, confusion, weakness, heart palpitations that mimic cognitive decline or post-surgical delirium. Dash three dash, claim I was becoming confused and forgetful, perhaps doctor shopping until they found a compliant physician who would sign off on the assessment of cognitive decline. Once I was declared legally incompetent, Ethan, as my power of attorney, could have made the changes to the will that Charlotte wanted, or they could have simply continued with the colchicine until the symptoms caused a fatal event that looked like natural, complex complications. The magnesium/calcium forte suddenly made perfect, terrible sense. High doses would cause confusion and heart arrhythmia, giving them the medical documentation they needed to claim rapid decline. I felt a wave of nausea, profound and consuming. That evening, I called my most trusted friend, Jean-Pierre Dubois. We'd started our careers together 45 years ago, and after Marie died, he was the only one checking on me weekly. Arthur, how is that new titanium hip holding up? The hip is excellent, Jean-Pierre. I need to ask you something vital, and I require total, brutal honesty. Of course. In the past year, have I seemed different to you? Confused? Forgetful? Anything at all that might suggest the start of cognitive decline? A long silence stretched across the line. Arthur, you are sharper than the senior partners half your age. Just 2 months ago, you spotted a critical structural oversight in the plan for that new university library in error -7. Other engineers had missed. Why are you asking this terrifying question? I told him everything. The nurse's whisper, the overheard conversation, the fake supplements, the sudden fixation on my will and mental capacity. When I finished, Jean-Pierre was quiet for a longer, heavier moment. What will you do now? He finally asked, his voice low with shock. I don't know, I admitted. I can't go to the police with I overheard something suspicious. I need proof. Conclusive, physical proof. Do you still have a bottle of supplements? Yes. I never took a single pill. Get tested privately. I know a retired forensic chemist who runs an independent lab out in Laval. If those pills are tampered with, that is your evidence. And if they aren't, then maybe you're just paranoid and we can all breathe a little easier. He paused again. But Arthur, I've known you long enough to trust your professional instincts. If something feels fundamentally wrong, it usually is. The next day, I convinced a physical therapist to let me use the facility's small business center to check complex emails. Instead, I researched private investigators specializing in estate litigation and elder fraud in Montreal. I found one with superb reviews, Isabelle Tremblay. When I called, she sounded completely unfazed by my bizarre story. Mr. Vance, you would be utterly astonished how prevalent this is. Adult children accelerating their parents' decline for a substantial inheritance. We see it far, far more often than the public realizes. Can you help me? Tell me everything you know. The full history. I laid it all out. She listened without a single interruption. Okay, she said when I finished. First, we get the definitive analysis on those pills. Second, I need immediate access to their financial situation. Money is almost always the primary motive. Third, we document absolutely everything. Every conversation, every interaction. If they're planning something, they will inevitably make a mistake. How much will this process cost? My retainer is $10,000. But Mr. Vance, Isabelle said dryly, If they are genuinely trying to kill you for $8 million, 10,000 is a remarkably excellent investment in staying alive. She had an undeniable point. The lab result came back 3 days later. Isabel called me immediately. They're definitely not magnesium/calcium forte. I had expected it, yet hearing the confirmation felt like a devastating blow to the chest. What are they, Isabel? They are colchicine dash. It is a drug typically used to treat acute gout flare-ups, but in doses -4 times the standard maximum, especially combined with your specific blood thinners, it is highly cardiotoxic. It causes organ failure that can mimic rapid, natural causes in older patients. Whoever prepared these knew the pharmacology exactly. How would they even get colchicine? I asked, my hand starting to shake violently. Charlotte works in private equity, correct? My background check shows her firm heavily invests in pharmaceutical supply chain logistics. She would have the connections, the knowledge of drugs, and the detailed information about your existing medication profile. She is the architect. This is real, I whispered, the weight of the certainty crushing me. They were really trying to kill me. Yes, Mr. Vance, they were. But now, we have the tangible evidence. What do we do next? That depends entirely on what result you desire. We can immediately go to the police with this lab result. Press charges for attempted murder and conspiracy. Or, she paused carefully, or what? Or we can gather more evidence, build an airtight, overwhelming case, and confront them in a manner that ensures they never attempt this again. Sometimes, Mr. Vance, legal consequences are not as effective as destroying their entire criminal plan, exposing their malice publicly, and making certain they lose every single dollar they were trying to gain. I thought about Ethan, my son. In spite of the horrifying facts, a stubborn, wounded piece of me still loved the boy he had been. I need to understand why, I said quietly. Before I decide anything else, I need to know why my son wanted me dead. Isabel's detailed financial investigation took -2 exhaustive weeks. What she finally uncovered was infinitely worse than I had initially hypothesized. Ethan and Charlotte were catastrophically leveraged. They had plunged enormous sums into volatile, high-risk blockchain venture capital and had lost nearly everything when the sector sharply corrected. They had taken out -3 mortgages on their condo, maxed out -4 premium credit cards, and, most damningly, borrowed heavily from aggressive private lenders with absolutely brutal triple-digit interest rates. They owed an astronomical sum, $1,150,000 in total debt, and the private lenders were now issuing credible threats of violence if the principal was not repaid within -60 days. My total estate, valued at nearly $8 million, was their escape route more than enough to instantly clear their debts and leave them with a comfortable cushion. Charlotte had been the calculated, relentless architect. Isabel found dozens of damning text messages, printed emails, and deleted search histories on Ethan's secondary tablet. Undetectable compounds causing cardiac failure, methods to induce sudden onset neurological symptoms, how to mimic the appearance of vascular dementia. Ethan, Isabel reported, had initially resisted. The early messages showed him agonizing, hesitating, and questioning the morality of the plot, but Charlotte had systematically worn him down, deploying every manipulative tactic. "It's not like we're truly murderers," she had written in one chilling text message. "He is old anyway, Arthur. We are simply accelerating the inevitable -5 or -10 years. And just think about the freedom. We can have the life we deserve with that capital. We can finally be safe. The life they deserved." I had given Ethan everything paid for his education, provided steadfast support after Marie's passing, welcomed Charlotte into my home, even when she often made it brutally clear that she found me provincial and boring. And this was the return on my investment, a murder plot driven by $1 million debt. I called a family meeting. The setting, Neutral ground a large conference room at Dominique Pelletier's law office. I told Ethan it was a final discussion on estate restructuring, and I explicitly required Charlotte's presence as well. They arrived precisely on time, dressed impeccably in their business attire. Ethan looked pale, perpetually exhausted. Charlotte's smile was unnaturally sharp, almost brittle. "Thank you both for coming," I said, my voice steady. "Please take a seat." Dominique, my lawyer, was there. Isabel, the private investigator, sat silently in the far corner with her sleek laptop, acting as a crucial observer. Jean-Pierre was there as my unshakable personal witness. Ethan glanced around the crowded room, confused. "Dad, what is this?" "You said this was a simple review of the trust documents." "It is," I confirmed. I slowly slid a thick, dark red file folder across the expansive mahogany table. "Go ahead, Ethan. Open it." I watched his face as he flipped through the pages. The color instantly drained from his cheeks. The documents were devastating. The certified lab report on the pills, the 20-page financial investigation detailing their massive debts, the printed, incriminating emails, and the most damning search histories. Charlotte snatched the folder from his trembling hands, read quickly, then looked up at me with eyes that were now pure, freezing ice. "This is completely illegal," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "Invasion of privacy, corporate espionage. None of this manufactured evidence would ever hold up in a court of law." "Actually," Isabel interjected calmly from the corner, "when investigating a felony, such as attempted homicide and conspiracy to defraud an elderly person, quite a lot of legal attitude is given for evidence gathering, especially when the victim is elderly and currently vulnerable." "Attempted murder?" Charlotte laughed, a sound that was grating and completely theatrical. "That is an utterly insane charge. Those pills were just colchicine." I interrupted quietly. "Toxic when combined with my blood thinners and existing hypertension medication." "You knew the exact pharmacology, Charlotte. You researched the lethal synergy. The private laptop history confirms it." Ethan's hands were now shaking so violently that he had to brace himself on the table. "Dad, I can explain everything." "Explain what?" My voice remained calm, almost dangerously so, but the emotion inside me was a violent, screaming maelstrom. "Explain how you planned to meticulously poison me. Explain how you calculated the fatal timeline to look like post-surgical complications. Explain how you rationally decided that your own father's life was worth less than clearing your catastrophic $1 million debt. It wasn't gambling." Charlotte spat out. "It was high-risk investments that simply did not materialize. And you were going to leave everything to him anyway. What difference does it make if he gets it now or -7 years from now when you die naturally?" The casual, chilling cruelty of her logic stunned me into temporary silence. "The difference," Dominique said, her voice like cut glass, "is the gulf between homicide and inheritance. One is a capital crime. The other is a complex legal process." Charlotte stood abruptly. "We are leaving. You can't legally prove any of this. Sit down." I didn't raise my voice by an inch, but something in the sheer force of my control made her freeze and slowly sink back into her chair. "We are not finished here. What do you want?" Ethan's voice was barely a strained whisper. "What are you going to do to us?" I looked at my son, truly looked past the panic and the betrayal, and saw only a complete stranger. "I'm going to give you a choice," I stated. "A choice that will define the rest of your lives. Option 1, I continued, emphasizing the gravity. I go to the Charité du Quebec with all of this evidence right now. You are both instantly charged with attempted murder, conspiracy to commit elder fraud, and potentially more. You both go to prison, you lose your professional licenses, and your lives are irrevocably destroyed." Charlotte opened her mouth to protest. I held up a silencing hand. "Option 2, I said, leaning forward. "You agree to the following non-negotiable conditions." Charlotte, You resign from your firm immediately. Ethan, you do the same. You both enter mandatory, separate counseling for a minimum of 3 years. You sell your condo immediately. You use the entire proceeds to pay down your outstanding debts. You move into a modest, two-bedroom rental in a quiet suburb. You find normal, simple jobs. You live normal, quiet lives. That's absolutely insane. Charlotte protested, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. I'm not finished. You both must immediately sign a comprehensive, legal document admitting to the attempted act and the underlying conspiracy outlined in that folder. That document remains in Dominique's safe. If either of you ever contacts me again for any reason, or if either of you ever attempts this kind of financial or physical abuse with anyone else, that document immediately goes to the police and the press. And finally, you both legally surrender all rights to my estate. My entire wealth, every single dollar, is immediately directed to charity instead. You can't do that. Ethan gasped. I can, and I already have the provisional documents prepared. But here is the part one I'm offering out of whatever residual love I still have for the memory of my son. I will not press criminal charges. I will not destroy you publicly. I will give you a silent, solitary chance to rebuild your lives honestly, to become fundamentally better people than you have shown yourselves to be today. Ethan's eyes were glistening with shock and despair. Dad, do not call me that. The words came out harsh, sharp, and final. You forfeited the right to call me that the moment you calculated that my life was worth less than clearing your irresponsible debt. The room was silent. The only sound was the distant drone of downtown traffic 30 stories below. So, I asked, my voice holding the final gavel of judgment. What is it going to be? Prison, or a long, difficult path to redemption? They chose redemption. Of course they did. Faced with the certainty of prison, professional ruin, and public humiliation, they chose the punishing path of a quiet, debt-ridden future. Over the next 8 weeks, I watched from a meticulous distance as they systematically dismantled the extravagant life they had constructed upon lies and financial folly. The condo sold quickly. Charlotte resigned. Ethan handed in his notice. They moved into a cramped, two-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood in the suburbs of Longale. The signed, detailed confession sits safely in Dominique's fireproof safe. I immediately changed my will. Everything the $8 million estate is now split between a major cardiac research foundation established in Marie's name and a dedicated elder abuse prevention advocacy fund. I never spoke to Ethan again. He tried 3 times emails, a lengthy, handwritten letter, but I deleted or discarded them all without reading a single word. Some betrayals, I learned, cut so deep that forgiveness is not merely difficult, it is a psychological impossibility. But here's what I did do. I began volunteering regularly at the Lakeshore Recovery Center, the very rehabilitation facility that had provided me sanctuary. I started a dedicated outreach program educating older patients and their families about financial manipulation, elder abuse, and the subtle, dangerous warning signs that someone, even a loved one, might be attempting to take advantage of them. I told my story, always anonymously, but I told it with absolute emotional fidelity. How a nurse's simple whisper had saved my life. How my own son tried to kill me. How dangerously easy it is to become a victim when you place your absolute trust in the wrong people. Patricia Dubois, the senior nurse who had risked everything to warn me, became a true and trusted friend. We meet for coffee every Thursday morning. She shares stories from her 2 decades. In healthcare, some profoundly heartwarming, others completely horrifying. You know what truly haunts me, Arthur? She confessed one morning. All the times I had that chilling feeling that something was wrong, a gut instinct, but I talked myself out of saying anything. All the patients I might have saved if I had been brave enough to step forward and issue that warning. You saved me, I reminded her gently. I almost didn't, she admitted, stirring her coffee slowly. I almost convinced myself it was none of my business, that it was paranoia. But then I kept thinking, what if he was my own father? What would I demand that someone do? That is the only question that matters, isn't it? What would we want a stranger to do for our loved ones? I'm 70 now. My hip has healed completely. I walk 5 kilometers every day along the old port of Montreal, and I volunteer at the recovery center twice a week. I have a good life. It is certainly not the life I envisioned when Ethan was born, when I held that tiny, fragile baby and promised him my eternal protection. It is not the life Marie and I had meticulously planned, growing old surrounded by noisy grandchildren. But it is a good, meaningful life nonetheless. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not sending Ethan and Charlotte to prison, if I believe they genuinely deserved a second chance at liberty. Here's what I tell them. I did not give them a second chance for their sake. I did it solely for mine, because I needed to know that I was still capable of showing profound mercy, even when staring down the barrel of the deepest, most agonizing betrayal. I needed to prove to myself that I was better, stronger, and fundamentally more principled than the monsters they had chosen to become. Did they learn from it? I truly do not know. I hope, with a deep ache, that they did. But that weight of responsibility is no longer mine to carry. Why to know is this? There are countless Ethans and Charlottes everywhere in every city, every neighborhood. People who view their elderly parents or vulnerable relatives not as cherished individuals, but as obstacles to wealth, as financial commodities, or as problems to be quickly solved. The statistics for elder financial abuse are staggering, costing Canadians billions of dollars every single year. And those are only the cases that we successfully identify. How many people quietly pass away from complications that were actually murder? How many slide into cognitive decline that was actually slow poisoning? How many simply slip away while their children meticulously count the impending inheritance? We will never know the real numbers. But every time I speak to a gathering of seniors, every time I see that flicker of dawning recognition in someone's eyes, that horrified realization of, oh God, that is happening to me, I know with absolute certainty that I am making a difference. Patricia saved my life with -6 words. I am desperately trying to pass that profound gift forward. And to anyone reading this, anyone who recognizes even a fragment of this story in their own complex family dynamics, I implore you, listen to your instincts. If something feels fundamentally wrong, investigate it immediately. If a trusted, professional stranger warns you, listen to them. Do not instantly dismiss concerns simply because they originate from a loved one, because you love them, or because you cannot possibly imagine they would hurt you. Because sometimes, tragically, the people who are supposed to cherish us the most are the ones who are capable of the deepest, coldest cruelty. Trust but verify. Love but protect yourself fiercely. Hope for the very best, but always, always plan for the calculated worst. And if a nurse ever whispers a solemn warning in your ear, for God's sake, listen to her. She might be the only thing standing between you and disaster. I still have the bottle of fake, lethal colchicine. Dominique keeps it in the firm's safe, right next to the signed confession. Sometimes I consider having it destroyed, but I keep it as a chilling reminder of how close I came, of how much I naively failed to see, and of how effortlessly trust can be weaponized against us. Last month, a woman approached me after one of my public talks at a community center in Westmount. She was weeping softly. My son has been incredibly insistent that I sign over a joint power of attorney, she confided. He's been so pushy, and his wife keeps talking about how I don't really need to live alone anymore, how I should give them immediate access to my accounts just in case of an emergency. I thought I was simply being paranoid for questioning their sudden interest. But after hearing your story, trust your instincts, I told her, holding her gaze firmly. Always trust your instincts. She called me -3 weeks later. She had retained an investigator. Her son and daughter-in-law have been digitally forging her signature on expensive investment documents for 7 months, systematically draining her retirement portfolio bit by bit. With the ironclad evidence, she was able to immediately secure the remainder of her wealth, stop them, and press charges. "You saved my life," she said, her voice filled with relief. "No," I corrected her gently. "Patricia saved mine. I am merely paying that gift forward. It is truly all any of us can do. Take the agonizing pain we have experienced and transform it into something that actively helps others. Convert betrayal into robust protection. Transform profound grief into unwavering advocacy." I think Marie would approve. She always said I had a gift for careful teaching, for explaining complex structural things in ways that people could genuinely understand. I believe my teaching days ended with retirement. I was wrong. Some of the most crucial lessons can only be taught by those who have learned them the hardest, most devastating way. I'm Arthur Vance. I'm 70 years old. I am a survivor of elder financial abuse and attempted murder by my own son. And I am here to tell you that it can happen to absolutely anyone. It happened to me, but I am still here, still fighting, still making sure that every senior who hears my story knows they have the fundamental right to question, to investigate, and to protect themselves fiercely. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one you implicitly trust the most. And sometimes a whispered warning from a total stranger is the only thing standing between you and disaster.